This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, well, again, thank you everybody for joining us. My name is Christopher Musanegi, Musanegi Financial Group, and tonight we're going to be talking about Social Security. Last week we talked about Medicare, and so we thought it made sense to follow that up with Social Security because these are two topics that really go hand in hand. And both of them have multiple issues that come with them in terms of they're confusing on how they work. And so really making sure that folks understand exactly how these programs work has become very important to us. And so that's why we've been doing these for the last few years. So tonight, again, the focus is going to be Social Security. And we're going to really hit on 4 areas. So first, we're going to talk about some of the essentials, some of the basics. Then we're going to talk a little bit about benefits and different options. And then we're going to talk about some strategies to consider. And then last but not least, some next steps. So first and foremost, and these are a couple of the things that a lot of people get confused or don't quite understand how Social Security works when it comes to eligibility. So the most important thing is you have to qualify. And in order to qualify for Social Security, you have to have worked for 40 quarters. Now, essentially what that means is every year is broken into 4 quarters. So if you're working and you're getting wages in any quarter within a year, that counts as 1. If you work all 4 quarters of the year, that's 4. So you can see how it would take you 10 years of working full time all year, every year to get to 40 quarters. Now, the quarters don't need to be consecutive. So we work with a lot of folks who take time off for one reason or another and go back to work later, whether they're at home taking care of kids or parents or whatever it may be. And they go back later, or they work part-time here and there. Doesn't really matter how you get to the 40 quarters. What matters is that you get them. Once you have them, then you're eligible. The next thing is that your benefits are calculated based on 35 years of earnings, your 35 highest. A lot of people get confused with this because they assume it's like pension plans where, most people, if they worked somewhere and got a pension, it's based on maybe their last 5 years or something like that. Social Security is based on 35 years. The reason that's important is, again, for those folks who aren't working, every year, take some time off or whatnot, when they go back and they calculate those 35 years, any year that you don't have income shows up as a 0. So obviously when they're adding that in, it brings down your Social Security. So we always try and tell people if you're close to having 35 years, maybe you just need 1 more year or 1 or 2, maybe it's worth sticking around and working a couple of extra years to offset those zeros. Not always a big deal, but can definitely help when they're doing those calculations. Next thing that concerns people is the sustainability of the trust fund. Will there be Social Security? Well, what people don't understand all the time is that when money comes in, it comes in from a couple of places. One, revenues come in every pay from people's paychecks. That money comes into the trust fund. And then whatever money's not needed to be used to pay claims is then invested in bonds that are issued by the full faith and credit of the US government. It's a special issue bond. It's not something that you and I can go buy, but it does go into there. And so those bonds do pay interest. So that's the second way that money gets into the trust fund. So it's not just people paying in from their paycheck and your employer paying in the other side of the pay, but also interest that's being earned on these special issue bonds. The problem is that when we get out to about 2035, there's not going to be enough people paying in, and therefore we're not going to be able to earn enough interest to cover all the benefits that are owed. We'll be at approximately 80%. So the question there is, what do we do in order to fix this? Well, there are several different options that have been floated out there. None of them obviously have stuck yet because we still have this problem, but there's a variety of things that can be done. Just my personal opinion, I think there will always be some form of Social Security. Much like you'll see they've made in the upcoming slides, they've made changes to Social Security eligibility and things in the past. My assumption is they'll do the same thing going forward, and so thereby it'll protect Social Security for the long run. So there's a couple of terms that you need to understand when we're talking Social Security. The first is your full retirement age, or your FRA. Everybody loves acronyms. That's when somebody is of the age that they are entitled to receive their full primary insurance amount, or your PIA. Now, once upon a time, 65 was full retirement age. Well, a few years back, they decided that, again, in order to protect Social Security from running out of funds, that they were going to extend those ages. So what you have to do is look on the left side under the if you were born in, and that will be the year you were born. So for me, I look down and I'm at the bottom in the 1960 or later group. So then you look across, and whatever year you are, that's your full retirement age. So since I'm in that last group, my full retirement age is age 67. If you were born like my mom in the 1943 to 54 group, she was eligible at age 66. So you can see as we've gotten further and further out, they've pushed out when you can actually qualify for that full retirement age. And that's important because it means that it's a couple of years longer that I will have to wait in order to get my retirement, which means I'm not drawing on it necessarily as early. Then what they do is they calculate your insurance amount. So they take the money that you've earned over the years, they add to it the number of years that you've worked, they add to it your age, they put it into a formula, and they come up with your primary insurance amount, or simply said, the amount of Social Security you're entitled to. If you take your Social Security early, that number gets reduced. If you postpone taking it and you don't take it at full retirement age, but you take it later, then that can actually increase. And we'll talk about that here on the next slide. So in this example, we're assuming somebody's full retirement age was age 66, and they were going to get $2,000 a month as their insurance amount. Well, if they take it early, if they decide, don't want to wait until I'm 66, want to take it at 62, or any age below your full retirement. It doesn't have to be 62. It can be 62, 63, it could be 64 and 6 months, whatever that date is. There's a reduction in the amount that you receive. And essentially, the difference between taking it at 66 and 62 is 25%. Now, the interesting thing is that it's not a flat per year rate. It's actually month by month. So, when I jokingly said 64 years and 6 months, you get more money then than if you take it at 64 and 0 months. But if you wait to 65, you get a little bit more. So it's literally each month gets you closer and closer to that full retirement amount. The other side of it, though, is true too. The government will actually give you a bonus of up to 8% per year if you defer from your full retirement age up to age 70. So again, if you fall into that age 66 full retirement age bracket, that's a 32% increase just for waiting. Now, obviously, there's a reason why they want you to do that, much like requiring everybody to wait until they're a little bit older to take it. They know that the longer you have to wait to get there, there's a chance that you may not make it. They also know that it gives them more time to accumulate funds before they have to pay out. So there's a couple of reasons why, it's a benefit to the government, but it also could be a benefit to you. If you are a person who's very healthy, who has good genetics, your family lives to older ages, those kinds of things, then holding off to age 70 might make sense. If on the other hand, you don't, you have health issues, things like that, sometimes maybe you take it at 62. The biggest thing about Social Security is there is no right or wrong answer, and everybody's answer is going to be different. If I take it at 62, maybe that's what's right for me. If my next door neighbor takes it at 70, maybe that's what's right for them. So you really have to dig into this and figure out what makes the most sense for you. Again, lots of factors go into it. One of the big factors that goes into it sometimes is how much money do you have outside of Social Security? And why that's important is there are people we meet with from time to time who have limited amount of funds. And so for them, they have to take it early because they won't be able to generate enough income in retirement in order to retire when they want to. So if somebody wants to retire at 63, they may have to turn Social Security on so they can generate enough monthly income to pay all the bills. If, on the other hand, you've done well and you've saved and you don't need to turn it on early, there's a case to be made to hold off. So again, everybody's situation is going to be slightly different. Now, what this slide shows us is what happens if you decide to take it early. Let's say you take it at 62. And that's that line on the far left-hand side, close to zero there. And you see that grayish line goes up, and eventually you see it runs into the green line. So the gray line is age 62, the green line is age 66. And what this is telling us is when you get to 77.9 years of age, whether you started at 62 or you started at 66, at that point in time, you will have received, assuming you're doing the $2,000 a month from the last slide, you will have received $288,000 in the door from Social Security. From that point forward, though, you would have been better off waiting to age 66, because as you can see, the lines then diverge and the green line ends up being higher in the long run than the gray line. And so again, it really just depends on you and your thoughts. If you don't think you're going to make it to age 77.9, taking it early makes more sense. If, on the other hand, again, everybody in your family lives to 102, well, then maybe we should be looking at the blue line, because you can see with the blue line, once you get out to age 80, you will break even with those who take it at 62. So anything beyond age 80.5, you'd have been better off taking it at 70. And the break even at age 82.4 is when taking it at 70 and 66 are the same. And from any point beyond that, you'd have been better off waiting to age 70. So again, you can see there's going to be a variety of different options for people based on what they think their life expectancy is going to be. Looking back historically, when we were in the 60s, the answer was always take it early, because the average 65-year-old man was only going to live to 66. And so you may as well take it early because you're not going to be around. The average female who was 65 was going to live to age 73. Flash forward to 2019, the average 65-year-old male is now living to age 84 and female living to age 87. So you can see maybe it makes a little more sense to hold off on taking our Social Security. The other thing that we run into, though, with this is not just what life expectancy is going to be. There is a thought process out there that says if you don't turn your Social Security on and you pass away, you don't get anything from Social Security. So it's always better to take it early. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It is a thought process. But it is true. If you're 63, 64, and you've decided you're going to wait until full retirement age, and for some reason you pass away before you get to 66, you receive zero payments. Your spouse or children, nobody receives those payments. You get a $255 death benefit and that's it. So again, that's another reason why some people like to turn it on sooner than later, just because they want to make sure they get something. I always use my uncle as the example. My uncle passed away just over 61 years of age. Never was able to actually collect Social Security. So somebody like him, had he lived a little bit longer, would have made sense for him to turn it on. Again, he had some health issues, so it would have made sense for him to do that. But nobody got his Social Security. It just went back into the trust fund and has been split up by all the other beneficiaries out there. So again, different reasoning for taking it depending on your life situation. So here's the thing I think is interesting. They look at then, when are people actually taking Social Security? And frankly, I don't think this is very surprising, but 42% of men are taking Social Security at age 62, 48% of women are, 34% of men take it at 66, 27% of women take it at 66, and only 6% total, 2% of men and 4% of women, wait to age 70. And again, I think part of that is just because we just don't know how long we're going to live, and so people would rather turn it on and maybe not have the same total amount in the door, maybe ended up taking a little less, but knowing that you've at least taken some. So just interesting to see. And those numbers haven't changed drastically over the last 5-10 years. The amounts and when people are taking them has been fairly steady. Now, here is one thing that you do have to really think about, though, if you're considering taking it early. If you're going to be working and taking Social Security, that gets a little messy. If you take Social Security before your full retirement age, so again, in my case, age 67, and I'm still working, so let's just say I'm still here at my desk every day. Once I make $18,240, and that number does increase, but right now, if I were to earn more than that, then for every $2 over that amount of money, Social Security would take $1 back from me. So if you're working full time and you're under your full retirement age, there's really no good reason to turn Social Security on. If you're only working part-time and you're staying under that 18,240, then could make perfectly good sense. We see a lot of people do that. They'll retire from their regular full-time job and take on an encore career. Maybe working, driving a school bus, maybe just working at Walmart as a greeter, just working at a museum, something fun, something they enjoy doing, but they're not doing that because that's going to be their full-time life's work. And so they're making sure that they stay under that $18,240 limit, and they take their Social Security and they're just fine. But once they get over that, that's when it becomes a problem. So it's something that you always have to pay attention to. Now, if you turn full retirement age, so the year in which I turn full retirement age, my birthday is in February, so I'll turn 67 in February. In that year, I'm allowed to make $48,600 before they start to take money back from me. So it works out a little bit better if you wait until your full retirement age year. And the other thing is they only take $1 for every 3 you earn over that. So they understand that it's your, potentially your last year working, so they give you a little more leeway. But once you turn full retirement age, so once I turn 67, I get through that 67 year, I can then turn on Social Security and make as much money as I want to. I can be Warren Buffett, I can be a gazillionaire, doesn't matter. There's no limit on how much I can make and still collect Social Security. So again, just a couple of little things to think about when it comes to what your work retirement plan is. If you're going to continue working, again, even if it's just something fun, you have to pay attention to how that'll potentially impact you. Then Social Security is also, believe it or not, taxable. So if you're receiving Social Security, there is a potential for you to have to pay taxes on your Social Security. My mom always says that when she rules the world, this will be the first thing that goes away. You shouldn't have to pay tax on your Social Security. Unfortunately, it is what it is. And so what you have to think about is a couple of things. One, are you a single filer or are you a married filer? And then from there, you have to figure out how much do you make each year? So for example, you take your modified adjusted gross income, and we'll get a little more into that on the next page. And then you add to that Social Security. So again, if we go back to that $2,000 a month thing, you can see how somebody who's a single filer who's making $2,000 a month in Social Security could very easily get to that $25,000 threshold if they have any other income. So assuming they do, and let's assume they have $1,100, $1,200 from something else, so they go over that 25,000 and they fall into the next category, then 50% of your Social Security becomes taxable. So that means that of that $2,000, 1,000 of it will be taxable. Let's say, on the other hand, though, that you've got significant assets and you're bringing in a pension or something like that, in addition to your Social Security, well, once you get to $34,000 as a single filer, 85% of that is going to be taxable. So again, if you've got $2,000 a month coming in, $1,800 and change is going to be taxable. So again, important to remember, most folks that we deal with are in that 85% area because again, their Social Security gets them pretty close. Even though they're only factoring in half of that, it still gets them pretty close. And then the modified adjusted gross income gets them the rest of the way. And the things that go into that modified adjusted gross income are any income you have from municipal bonds, any wages, so if you're working, if you own a business, interest that you get on your, well, right now interest is kind of funny because you're not getting a whole lot on your savings accounts or CDs, but someday if interest rates go up, that will become important. Capital gains, any dividends from stocks or anything that you own, and then traditional IRA distributions. And that's really the big one that hits most of our clients because they have retired, had some type of retirement plan at work and moved that money into an IRA. And then from there are taking monthly distributions to generate their income. Because of that, typically that's why people get bumped up. Things that are not included in that is the tax deferred buildup inside of that IRA. So if you have $100,000 inside of your IRA and it grows to $110,000, the growth from 100 to 110 is not taxable. It's only taxable when you actually take the money out of there. So if it goes from 100 to 110 and you take $10,000 out, that gets factored in. But as long as it stays in the IRA, it does not. The other thing that's not included is income from Roth IRAs. So this is why Roth IRAs have become more and more popular, especially right now with tax rates being low. People are looking at Roths a little bit more because they're assuming that income tax rates in the future are going to be higher. And so when you take money out of a Roth IRA, you do not pay federal income tax, and it's not included in this calculation. So it helps a lot. The other thing is if you have any life insurance and there's income coming out of those, that is not included. So again, just a couple of things to think about the way that you have your assets set up going into retirement. Now, spousal benefits are also important for a few different reasons. One, if you do have one spouse who stayed home, raised the kids, or took care of a parent, then that person may not be receiving as much in retirement as somebody who stayed working full time. And so you have to sort of pay attention to how one person's decision is going to impact the other. Because if one spouse decides to take it early, take Social Security early, that could impact the other spouse and their ability and how much they get when they take it, especially if they're going to claim on the other spouse. And so what you see here is if you have somebody who claims at full retirement age of 66, well, their spouse would get 50% of theirs or 100% of their own, assuming that the non-working spouse or the one that didn't have as much earned wants to take it early. You can see that it continues to go down and down and down. So they're getting significantly less if they take it at age 62. So you really have to do the math and talk to the folks at Social Security to see the impact of taking this early. And basically what you see here on this page is just a different way of depicting what was on the other. So in this case, you have Joe and Aaron. Their full retirement age is both 66. Joe's monthly is going to be $1,900. Aaron's is $900. So you can see the higher earner, in this case being Joe at age 62, from 62 up to his life expectancy of 84 would have brought in $376,200 to the household. At the same time, Aaron would have brought in $187,400. Once Joe passes away and Aaron's left, she only brings in another $85,500. That's all that's left to her because he took it early. Now, had he taken it at full retirement age, you can see just how much more money the two of them bring in together. Instead of just $649,000, now we're up to $729,000. So an $80,000 difference for two people with the exact same situation, just waiting a little bit longer to take their Social Security. And then if you wait again up until age 70, you can see how that number goes up again from 729 up to 771,000. So again, lots of different reasons for why we take things, but the Social Security Administration also eliminated a lot of different options about 7 years ago. And because of that, it's really made this choice for couples a lot more difficult. So you have to really look at it, again, figure out what your situation is, and then from there, determine if it makes sense to take it early. So again, there are strategies that you need to take and think about for couples, figuring out when they should take it, how they should take it, what the survivor benefit will be to the person left. And then there's actually a benefit for ex-spouses. And we'll get to that here in a second. But it's something that's very important to know exists and is very important to know that you're eligible for it. So again, when we're talking about maximizing benefits, it really just comes down to figuring out what's the most important to, in this case, Joe and Aaron, what will be left over and how that's going to impact the person who's left. And so again, going and sitting with the folks at Social Security, they will not make recommendations, but they can show you how the numbers will work. Again, in this case, the case of John and Claire, in this one, if she's living to a life expectancy of 94, over her lifetime, that number is going to be even bigger. So you can see we're talking between age 62 and 70, $110,000 more. So it's very important to take those into account. The other thing is, If you're no longer married, okay, so all of these things work if you were married and you've been married for at least 9 months. But they can also work if you're married to an ex-spouse for at least 10 years. So let's say you get married, you're married for at least 10 years, and you do not remarry prior to age 60. Well, in that case, you can potentially claim on your ex-spouse. So there are some hoops you have to jump through. You have to provide marriage certificates and divorce information to Social Security, and they will go and research it for you. The important thing is that the ex-spouse does not need to know that you're claiming on them. They will never find out. But you are eligible potentially to claim on them if you fit this criteria. So again, if I'm married for 10 years, get divorced, my ex-spouse down the road decides that she wants to claim on me, she may be able to claim and get 50% of my benefit if it's higher than her benefit. So again, can be very interesting and can be very important. It becomes more important, and we've had this happen a couple of times with clients who have been divorced, and we've done some planning for them using the assumptions that they would claim on that ex-spouse, and then they get remarried. And now their Social Security is going to be completely different because it's going to be based on the new spouse, not the ex-spouse. So again, can be important to look into, important to talk to the folks at Social Security. We can help with some of this stuff, but really the folks at Social Security are the experts on this. They are not the easiest people to get appointments with sometimes, but when you do get an appointment and you go, they are a wealth of knowledge. They are one of the, in my opinion, one of the best trained government agencies we have. And so that's why I suggest people take advantage of them, because that's your tax dollars hard at work there. So you should take it. Even though you can apply for Social Security online and over the phone, I never recommend people do that. I always recommend you go, you sit with somebody in person and you go through all of your different options, because you don't want to miss anything. And the way Social Security is now, once you make a decision, you're basically stuck with it. There is no going back. Once upon a time, you were able to take Social Security, and if you changed your mind, all you had to do was pay them back, and then you could start over again. You can't do that anymore. Those things were thrown out a few years back when they made all the big changes. So making sure that you're taking the opportunity to go meet with the Social Security Administration and learn about your specific options is very important. One of the other things that's important is that you don't rely only on Social Security. Unfortunately, there's a large portion of the population that does rely, maybe not in whole, but a majority of their money is coming from Social Security. And you can even see here, the goal once upon a time was that Social Security was just supposed to be a portion. In this case, they're saying 35%. Then once upon a time, people had pensions. And then you would have your savings and investments and earnings from those investments. So that's how Social Security was originally designed to be. It was supposed to be there to help older folks to get through retirement and supplement other things, not necessarily be 100% of your income. And so it's important to have other buckets of money to pool for expenses, for healthcare, for mortgage, for whatever other expenses you have. So the final section here is next steps. And really, this is sort of, next steps is sort of something I've been talking about through the entire presentation. So the first thing is sit down and come up with a budget for retirement. We sit with clients and we do that all the time. Figure out what their financial plan is, figure out if they have the assets to retire and when, and how much of those assets they're going to need a retirement. And then from there, take that plan, take that budget, and really make a detailed plan with milestones saying, when I get to this age, we're going to do this. When I get to this age, we're going to do that. So you know what you are going to be doing in the future. So there's no surprises, or we try and limit the surprises. And then last but not least is scheduling regular check-ins. These things are never set in stone. This is not a one-time set it and forget it kind of thing. Financial plans, reviewing your budget, reviewing your investments, that's an ongoing thing. It's never a just let's do it today and never think about it ever again, because life changes, especially in retirement. The biggest thing we see for clients is that, especially the first year of retirement, is the most difficult, because they're never quite sure how much money they're truly going to need. And so we have to be flexible. We have to come up with a plan, get through that first year, review it, see where we're at, make some changes, get through the second year, review it, so on and so forth. So again, it's about regularly reviewing and making sure you're still on track and that something hasn't happened to knock you off track. If you wait too long, you'll never be able to recover. But if there's something that happens in a given year and you're reviewing regularly, you can always make an adjustment. So those are the big next steps. Again, where it says meet with your financial representative, that's the shameless plug for give us a call. And let's get together and talk about your specific situation and go from there. So with that, I just would like to thank everybody for joining us this evening. Again, this is going to be recorded and put on our website, so if you'd like to listen to it again, or if you know folks who would be interested in it, feel free to tell them to come check it out. And we look forward to seeing you with one of our upcoming workshops in the future. So thank you very much. Have a good night.